Welcome to this episode of Thinking Inking. And I can almost hear them. Oh no, not again. Haven't we heard enough about this book? Sorry folks, but this one's a legend. Yeah. I want to show you some work that I've been practicing with here and there in between projects. Some of it you might have seen in another video, pretty sure, that I posted it. But before I do that, let me just talk a little bit about this, okay? I want you to picture this. It's 1979, 9 years old, Vancouver B.C. The school was Florence Nightingale, East Vancouver. And it's another one of our weekly trips to the library. Now, for the boys, we were thinking mostly when, we're thinking about recess, we're thinking about lunchtime, we're thinking about ball hockey on the grounds, we're thinking about soccer, we're thinking about the tire swing that they used to have on the side of that school, but they ripped it out. That thing, I am surprised. Maybe if anyone knows about this, anyone from this region or went to that school, or leave something about this, because that thing, when I think about it now, that thing was a death trap. I'm surprised. And I'm surprised it wasn't ripped out earlier, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone actually died from that thing. The height you could get on that goddamn apparatus. I mean, we're talking a heavy chain. The thing. Anyway, I didn't come to talk about the death trap tire swing that we all love so much. No helmets included, folks. It was like sheer mom heart attack stuff. And I wondered if some of the moms had seen, oh my God, how dangerous that thing was. How high we could get it. But here we are. We're in the library. We're heading in. And, next to playing tops with hockey cards in the basement during recess and lunch, there was, there were things like comic books, right? And you'd very quickly find out who had the big collections of comic books if you were into that sort of thing. And we had our handful of artists, that was for sure. But that didn't mean that the people that weren't artists weren't into comics. At that age, are you kidding? We knew. Well, anyway, we knew what time it was when we'd head to the library. There were certain books that you had to grab right off the trolley before they even hit the shelf when they were being filed back into the racks. And those books were a couple of horror movie character books, right? From the beginnings of cinema to like the early 70s. I remember them. You had FRANK&STERN and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, the werewolf, Godzilla, all that stuff. As boys, we loved that shit. It was those two. There were two books. They were always signed out. Someone always had it. Right? And you'd see kids run to the trolley to get it. Who was going to get it first? Sometimes these kids were friends and they'd be tugging on it, like a tug of war, right? Now, the other ones that were really hot at that period, they were novel or paperback like Star Trek books. Now, what they were the original series, and they're probably collector's items now. I wouldn't know. Maybe some of the Trekkies would know. But they were, right, in a novel form, right? They were from the original series, the actual original series, the actual stories of the original series, but they were in comic book form. But the unique thing about them was they weren't drawn images. They were fully realized color photographs of the movie, right? So combined between those monster books and those particular novels, graphic novels, but they were photographed, you know, they were the most sought after. And most of the time when someone got a hold of them, it would be sitting right out on their desk, right, for everyone to see. But the big one was this guy here. This guy here. Now, of course, I've only seen since then paperback editions. But the one there was a hardback edition, carefully wrapped by the librarians with plastic over. You know the deal, right? And I knew I had to get my hands on that. It was hard as hell. Someone would always grab it first, right? But on this particular day, I saw it. I saw my chance without a word darted for it. I had it. I had it. I had to sign it out, right? Picture that 9-year-old enthusiasm. And, you know, I must have flipped through it like 5 times before the school bell rang. But even on the way home, you know, I was thinking about getting home so I could look at it again. And without a word of a lie, I just want to say that this was one of those books that had one of the biggest impacts on me, right, at that age. And without a word of a lie, I got home, kicked off my shoes, got on my top bunk, and started flipping through that book. And what would happen was, I'd get to the end of it, the very last page, flip the book around, and just start all over. There was nothing else like it. It was almost like, you know, pornography for a sex offender, right? I mean, I can't describe the level of enthusiasm for that shit by Big John Buscema and his art. It was incredible, but it was an eye opener too into the craft, because, you know, suddenly, let's see here. I'm just gonna flip this open at random. Well, may as well we'll just go all through, you know. Had all these great, you know, explanations about the industry and the terms used, etc., right? You know, and then started actually explaining how you could see objects through cubes and cylinders, and teaching you how to rough out drawings. But the thing about it that really knocked my head off, right, was the fact that a lot of the work within the book was in graphite, right, in pencil. You know, who got a chance to see too much of that, you know, while they were reading the comics during those days? No, they were there. They appeared in their full form. We didn't know what was going on. Here's one of Thor. Look at that, right? Fully realized pencils, you know. I mean, they're tight enough, I'll put it that way, right? They're tight enough for what I later had in mind as an older person, right? Let's see. I remember just looking at this picture of Cap, right? And going, you know, as a 9-year-old, I was just blown away. I was like, those are pencils. I got a pencil. That means they do this with a pencil? Before it becomes a... Wow! That's incredible, right? It gave me an idea of a sense of a man behind that work. A hand that could render these images. You know, what did I know about how comic books came together, right? And I'd look at the shapes and forms, and I'd look at the drawings I was doing as a little guy and say, wait a minute, there's so much to know here. This was before studies of anatomy and all that, right? Looking at things and going, that's how this goes, and this is how that goes. And it was if I wasn't so excited, I would have been totally intimidated, right? Like I'd look at the eyes and say, he's got pupils. That makes it look so much realer. And this, and look at the shape of the mouth, and look at the sheen on the shield, and look at the way his boots go, and you know what I mean? You could look at his knuckles. I don't draw hands like that. What's going on? John Buscema's, anatomy went on to be legendary. It's just a fact. And I'd look at that, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I remember going over this one too, of our buddy Submariner here, right? And thinking, oh man, this is so awesome. Even the rock that he's standing on is awesome. Look at the plant life. Look at the detail in it. And I looked at the structure and anatomy of his back, and I thought, oh boy, there's so much to learn here. Oh God, I wish my drawings looked like that. You know what I mean? And all the time being fascinated by that element. What element? The element of graphite, of a simple pencil, letting you know that there's a man behind this, a hand wielding these forms. It was like opening up a new world to me of I don't know, seeing comic book art in a different way for the very first time, sort of deal, right? Well, time would go on, and there would be many things, many changes too. And I remember, here's one of the thing too. Remember that one too. I remember a certain phase, which is a little bit unusual, but hey, it happened. It is what it is. Exposed to some things pretty young. And by the time I was 11, it wasn't the first time either, but by the time I was 11, I had already discovered Heavy Metal magazine. I remember my little hand reaching up to the top shelf, and that would open up a whole new world. But it was weird because at that time, I certainly didn't have my friends at the time. They didn't, guys that I played hockey with and went to baseball and pee-wee football with, and at that time, we had similar interests, but certainly, there was no one there I could relate to reading those kind of books, right? Those kind of comic books. I was alone in it, but I was drawn towards it because of some fantastic stuff that I was seeing, But that was then, That was another thing. And that was around the first time I think I smoked pot, Things, the things that were going on for a kid that age were not things I could relate to with all my friends, I'll put it that way. But eventually moving to a different neighborhood, exposed, well, get a little older, 13, where more of that thing was coming on. By the time anyway, I'll leave that in another note. But the point is, as time went on, I remember it's now like 2000. A lot of things have happened, a lot of life, and I remember walking into I think the place's name was Carey's or Curry's Art Supply, at one of their branches in southern Ontario. And I saw this on the shelf, and I just knew I had to get it. There was no question. I was like, oh my God! Along with some other art books I got there. Some of the Hogarth stuff, Jack Ham, etc., right? And getting some supplies, some paint at the time. I was doing some canvases and stuff. But I picked up this softcover. Picked up another one I got in a thrift store just because I had to. You don't even understand. But anyway, after flipping through that graphite work, I realized that there was an opportunity here, Big John had, smattered the whole publication with penciled work. right? And they were tight enough that you could work with. And I thought, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Big John's been gone for a while now, right? Rest in peace. But the thing was, it's like, isn't this an opportunity to ink Big John's pencils? Right? I thought, why don't we go with that? So I got this idea to do just that, right? And the first one I went after, and I've got these photocopied in stages so you can see what was going on there. The first one I went after was the cap picture, right? I thought, yeah, check that out. I'm gonna do this Captain America one, right? So I did what I call the Manili approach, right? One all the way around, fine line on all the lines, right? But that was after, if you look, there's correction fluid all through this. After I knocked out what I thought were the unnecessary lines, construction lines, skeletal lines, that kind of thing. Get them out of there with the whiteout and then go in with the pen. Then go in with your deeper blacks, whiting out any smudges and stuff. And there it was, that's the finished actual work, right? And then get your photocopy after that, right, to remove the appearance of the whiteout. And there it was, right? Ink and Captain America, ink and John Buscema. I was like, hey, this is fun, right? Next, I went straight to Subby, our boy Subby here, Prince of Atlantis, right? I thought, wow, that rock is going to be interesting to do, right? But yeah, went for that next. Same thing, Manili approach, all the way around, inking with a fine liner on all the lines, right? All the way around the figure. Some dialogue there and stuff. Then I washed out the background with both correction fluid and ink, brushing it both in to give that water quality, swirling in the back. If you look at the print in the actual book, you see that it's a swirling. It's just, how would you do that? So I went ahead and did my best to come up with that, and, had a lot of fun. And I thought, and I'd look at it and I'd say, wow, that looks like 70s quality, inking and art. And I thought, well, see, when you're inking over one of the masters, these things are bound to happen, right? So that it's really like, it was really like giving me a chance. And here was a photocopy after those whiteouts were put in and what the actual copies would look like, right? And again, I thought, wow, this looks like a professional quality here, and that was a lot of fun. And it felt like my first shot at actually inking, right, in the industry, so to speak, over, an actual Marvel artist I shouldn't say Marvel because that's, but, someone of a caliber whom, whose skill can't be denied. Oh, and here's one too. Another. So remember the Ben Grimm, or the thing I showed you here, right? There he is in the penciled form, Big John. I went around and whited out some of the unnecessary lines, and then I Manili'd it all the way around with a thin fine liner again, every rock, right? Not really filling in the blacks yet. And then, go back in and fill in the darker shadows under the eyes and the rocks and all that. And there he was. Again, I was like, this is amazing. This is so much fun, right? It's not going to pay me anything, but I couldn't, I couldn't ignore the fact that, look, people, anyone who has this book, you have an opportunity to ink over Big John's pencils. Are you kidding me? Come on. It's a no-brainer. So had some fun doing that. Now, Another thing about this book, coming to that realization as a 9-year-old that these things were being rendered by a man's hand with a pencil, right? And it smacked of a message of potentiality and all that, sure. But when I try to describe the passion and the enthusiasm that was running through that kid's mind when he first picked it up, I'm sure there's so many people out there that can relate to this, especially those that went on to it. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, guys that didn't feel that way and would always go on and on about it just being a job and all this. And John, Big John, I'm sorry, he's one of them. I certainly didn't want to hear that rant, and I won't accept it, okay? I think that was just a disgruntled position. But the thing is, a lot of those classic artists, including those Bronze Age guys, were coming from an attitude where they had gone to art school for a bit, learning how to draw and paint, watercolors a little, doing some still life and all that. But they had aspirations of becoming illustrators for, pulp magazines or magazines and the pulps, as they call them, paperbacks, right, with Western paintings on them. And some of those guys became movie painters in the 70s and stuff. And there was a stigmatism attached to comic book work and art. And I guess there still is for some of them. Well, John seemed to complain about it all the time. I don't know. I always wondered about that sort of thing. But I think a lot of it, that kind of attitude, and there are others, but they're still alive, so I won't mention them in that respect. But I think they were simply reacting to an overabundance of, I don't know, overemphasis by, aspirational fandom around them. After a while, it probably got annoying. And a lot of the artists just felt like, yeah, it's great, but you understand it's a job, you know what I mean? And they want to tell you that once in a while because they get sick of it. It's like, well, if you feel that way, go get the job and do it, stop fanboying me, right? Or whatever. Not being arrogant, but just like trying to tell them, like, stop obsessing and get to work. You got to earn these skills. You think you're born with them, or think he's born with them? Where do you think it came from? When someone gets out there and starts rendering a drawing just out of their, you get to a level where you can do that, but you have to learn that before you get there. What do you think? You're just going to take whatever you got in your mind and have it come out onto paper. A lot of shitty artists think that way. So that when they see work that's well done, they start making noises, especially when they hear about referencing. Like Big John, for example, used to reference, he'd say cars. There was something else too. A lot of the guys would reference certain things that they were weak at or whatever. But people will hear that and they think it's all supposed to just fall out of your head and pen automatically due to talent. But they're wrong about that. Talent's going to give you not the foundation, but the fluidity to persevere as you're learning, right? But talent and style, those things shouldn't be your considerations when you're trying to learn how to do it. First you got to look at things and know what they look like and why the body looks like that's, they hear about art class where you're drawing or studying a nude model all day long and learning anatomy and stuff. Oh, but if you're using a picture, wait a minute. What are you talking about? The real figure is even more real than the photograph, but it's so stupid. And those people don't get anywhere. And I've already gone on those rants. But, on the other end, you have the high skilled guys that are just like, whatever, it's a job. But when you hear that, it is no matter what, right? People want to get paid, but at the same time, You know, I can't help but think that although they realize it's a job, they have, you know, most of them have to have a passion for what they do. But you'd hear Big John talk about that. I'm not really comics oriented, you know, or I don't really like the superhero comics and this and that, right? But at the same time, he knows he loves figure work, right? And he was one of those kind of guys that believe that when you're into it, you're doing it every day. Every day, every morning, you get up and start sketching, and you know what I mean? It becomes you. Anyway, I'm going on about, I don't know. But yeah, the impact of this book here was tremendous, and it's remained with me for a long time. I still look at the stuff, and I'm just fascinated by it. You know, what a lot of people out there, even artists, don't know about comic book work and the industry could fill a book, right? You know, but then on the other hand, there's a lot of fandom out there that knows, sometimes think they know, or sometimes even do know such a shitload, but they don't know what it takes to get on with their art. But you know, to learn it, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to fail. You got to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and keep going and persevere. And if you love it, you're always going to do it. You might not get paid for it every time, but you know, but you never know what might happen, right? But the passion certainly there. It's that special time too, between I say 9 and just, you know, as you're heading into adolescence at 13, that magical period where you're connecting yourself, and that's that point where I think it's determined, although it's not the developmental years up between 2 and 7, it's that point where a person, you know, a young person will find out whether or not they're going to go on to continue doing art through their teens, no matter how crazy it's getting or whatever. But oh my God, I'm telling you, finish it. I'd flip it over, start looking at it again. You know, it's just, look at this. I can't believe it. So great. Anyway, thanks for hanging out for my with my rant and taking a look at some of the inked work there. I'm definitely going to be doing more. I want to do all of the chapters of that book, those chapter introduction pages, those splash pages. Do them all, ink them up, make copies, you know, do it again, do it again, do it again, keep practicing those inks. There's a lot of people that are saying that inking's obsolete now. A lot of people doing it on their computers at home, blowing up images and then, you know, doing it. I don't want to say the wrong thing about these new aids because even professionals are doing it, or they can't help themselves or whatever. I don't know, but a lot can be said. Remember, John was doing this stuff with his own 2 hands, penciling his work, making these fully realized drawings, right? Like an illustrator with skill. Was his tool. You understand? I'm sorry. That's an artist. Okay? It takes more than just an idea to be an artist, all right? Or some concept you have about your political affiliations or socially what you... I don't... Give me a... You know, keep that stuff at home. Or keep that divided, you know? There is... You know, most people that pick up a pencil and want to draw, however they turn out, they usually want to render what they see, you know? But it's usually a question of who's going to study things enough. They think it's all fun. Oh, I can't draw these things, so I never draw them. Wrong approach. Anyway, don't want to get preachy. But, I don't know. Sure helped me. At least kept me passionate, you know? I mean, lately it's all I want to do. I don't know what else to tell you. But anyway, thanks again.